Stephen Jaffe was
Stephen, yeah.
running against, and he's a fine fellow, working person's lawyer, all that stuff. But he got crushed so hard. And then I started to realize that the San Francisco is not what people think it is. It's a bunch of rich people, right, that live in Nancy Pelosi's district. I mean, I couldn't
poverty here too. It is a lot of rich people, but it's more diverse than that.
It's more of a Hillary place than it is a Bernie place.
Well, not if I'm successful in my work. I mean, I'm running precisely to deliver San Francisco for Bernie. So
that's why my question is. So in my view, it's a Hillary. It's more of a corporate Democrat district than it is actually a progressive district. Can you win?
Yeah, no, I have every confidence that we're going to win. In fact, I would say that with every passing day, I grow increasingly convinced that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have a chance of retaining this seat, precisely because she is so allied with the Trump administration that she is relying on political theater to convince her constituents that she's actually showing up for work. And I have enough faith in my neighbors. I think we all see through it.
You do?
As we're canvassing, I'm out on the street, I'm talking to people, we're knocking on doors. At least half the people we talk to, when we say we're running against Pelosi, they're like jumping out of their shoes. And they're like, thank God, finally, we've been waiting. The whole city's been over her. You could think of Nancy Pelosi as a politician funded by corporate interests that are not based in San Francisco, who for the last 20 years has co-opted the voice of the country's most progressive city. Her leading contributors include pharmaceutical companies, health insurance companies, fossil fuel extraction companies, weapons manufacturers. None of them are based here. San Francisco might be a wealthy community, but we're still a home of the peace and justice movement. We're dedicated to climate justice. We're a sanctuary city. We're a welcoming city to people of all kinds, including people however they express their gender and orientation. As a cis hetero Muslim lawyer from the Midwest, I was fighting in the courts for marriage equality 10 years before Nancy Pelosi, with all the institutional privilege of the Speaker of the House, deigned to show up for the rights of my neighbors. And when she did finally show up, it was on the eve of a decision by a conservative Supreme Court that took it off the table. So she never, frankly, showed up at all. And I see this pattern. She funded Bush's wars.
Yes.
She swept CIA torture under the rug. The whole city, I think, for a generation has been waiting to shrug off the yoke of failed corporate rule. And to zoom out from San Francisco to think about the dynamic nationally, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to since I started running in 2018 who've said to me, I am with you. We need to take over the Democratic Party. I can't support you or she'll end my career. Every sitting elected, from members of state legislatures to people who aren't running but think they might, who say, I can't touch you because you're running against the party leader. And that, to me, demonstrates a crisis, another dimension of the crisis in democracy, when the so-called Democratic Party is so anti-democratic that people can't even contemplate making their own choices because they have to demonstrate fealty to the leader. And that's a dimension of the problem that I also am aghast by. And I'll make it even sharper than this. The Pelosi's plan for this seat, because Nancy Pelosi is in her 80s, they want to hand it off to her daughter. And if there's anything that pisses me off more than the corporate co-optation of the nation's most progressive city, it is nepotism. My family did not move halfway around the world so I could watch offices effectively be inherited by an aristocracy. And I'm not willing to let that go down. I mean, I am here, again, as a voice of the Constitution and a defender of the future. And the city is with me. They already are. I already represent San Francisco. It's just a matter of time before we make it inescapably clear that Nancy Pelosi lost her mandate by aligning herself too closely with Wall Street and the Beltway.
Boy, I really hope you're right about that. Wow. I really hope you're right about that. Which is why I dragged my feet on having you on the show. It's just that I was so disappointed. I just think I just thought that district was so, wealthy and so out of touch with progressives that, it would be. So I hope you can do it. You're a great speaker, and so hopefully it'll work. Now, are you afraid that? So now in California, we have a weird system that the rest of the country doesn't have. So go ahead and tell people.
The top two, jungle primary. Most people think of primary elections as each separate party having their own separate election, and then the winners going to fight each other in the general. And here in California, because so much of the state is effectively a one-party region, we decided that all of the parties and all of the candidates will run against each other in the primary, and the top two, whichever party they come from, will go to the general election. So if I'm successful in March, and frankly, I'm very confident about our position to take the second place in the March primary. When I'm on the general election ballot against Pelosi in November, it will be the first time in this seat that there has been an intra-democratic general primary challenge. And the idea of having an intra-democratic party challenge in the general election means that somebody like me, coming from the left against Pelosi, I don't have to beat her in the primary. I can take second, and then I'll have the opportunity to face her alone in November. And it creates a remarkable opportunity for people like me in this race. In the past, one of the challenges of the jungle primary is that when a lot of people feel opportunity and they jump in a race and it gets crowded, it can be difficult to establish enough momentum to consolidate enough support to hit second. And when I ran last year in 2018, I did lead the progressive field. And frankly, I did so by a mile. I wasn't able to consolidate enough support to get second place. So I was edged by a Republican by 1,000 votes. Just a couple notes there. I was only in that race for 3 months and I got no media attention. And we got 17,500 votes because we ran in the strongest campaign for the seat that San Francisco's ever seen. This race, we've drawn support from 10 times as many people. We've raised about 8 times as much money. And we still have 10 months left. We have literally thousands of volunteers who signed up on our campaign. We have hundreds who are actively mobilizing at any given point. These are among the reasons why I think Pelosi doesn't have a chance. I appreciate your point about, I do know what to do with the microphone, but it's not on the basis of my skill that I think we're going to flip the seat. The reason we're going to flip the seat is just we're getting so much support, A. B, Pelosi is veering so far to the right constantly, and every time she does it, she pushes supporters into our arms. C, Trump is doing such terrible things to the republic that everyone is growing alarmed, and people who never paid attention to politics before are growing woke. And as they examine the facts and they examine the issues and they examine the history, they're discovering that Nancy Pelosi is no friend of theirs. And you're totally right, just to press on what a question that I hear you raising, that San Francisco has changed a lot, right? It's not the same city as we were in the 1980s and 90s. And frankly, if this were still 1990s San Francisco and I had the chance to run as who I am now with that electorate, we'd win this race blindfolded with my hands behind my back. But even though the city is very different now, and there has been vicious gentrification here, and the housing costs are through the roof, and it's a much wider city than it used to be, and it is a much wealthier city, and also a much poorer city. Our homelessness problem has gotten much more visibly acute. San Francisco, among the newcomers to San Francisco, are either people who are grappling with the empire from underneath the boot. For instance, all of my neighbors who are unhoused and people who are struggling with the cost of housing and everything else, healthcare in this city. And it includes a lot of people, and I think this is what you're pressing on, upwardly mobile, often very white, and predominantly technologists who have come into the city. Those people, we can get them. They will vote for us for a couple of different reasons. One, they're empiricists. They know that the climate chaos is coming for them, and they know that no amount of money is going to insulate them from it. And they recognize that the corporate Democratic Party is running our country and our species off a climate cliff. And those technologists are not willing to be lemmings. They are at least politically iconoclastic. Now, a lot of them are atomized. They're not necessarily engaged. And so my project, our work over the next 10 months is to reach, engage, and involve those people. And it's because of my faith in my neighbors, frankly, and my very profound belief in the wisdom of this city that I am so confident that I'll be representing it in a year.
So because we have this jungle primary, it doesn't really matter what party you're in when you run. So why?
That's right.
So, I mean, you're not, you share no values with the Democratic Party as it is today. So why not take this unique opportunity to run outside the party?
Because I want to take the party over. I mean, beyond liberating one seat, if we knock out Pelosi, the value proposition here ultimately is to send a signal across the country that no Democrat who is a centrist is safe in any urban area. Ocasio-Cortez started that in the last cycle. I think she knocked out the number 3 Democrat in the corporate cabal. If we take out the leader, the signal that sends, I mean, I'm playing for marbles much bigger than one congressional seat. And if I ran for some other party, it would just be for the seat that I would be contending. But I'm contending much more than the seat. I mean, we are here to remove the corporate co-optation of the Democratic Party. I often say that my candidacy proposes to end the bipartisan consensus on corporate rule. In that respect, I feel a great deal of alignment, inspiration with the next president. Bernie Sanders has been pounding this drum for 50 years. And, I've been doing it for 20. I don't have his longevity, but I do have the same depth of commitment and the same demonstration of commitment to putting people before profit and communities before corporations my entire career. And I've done that as a direct action activist. I've done it as an impact litigator. I've done it as a policy advocate, as an artist. And I've done it as a national nonprofit leader, and now I'm doing it as a congressional candidate. And I hope to take that same voice into Congress. And I think that we have an opportunity here bigger than a seat, bigger even, frankly, than just ending the bipartisan co-optation of our democracy. I think at the end of the day, what we are talking about here is will our species have a future or not? And I think that the climate crisis and the need to secure a consensus on the Green New Deal and the need to secure a consensus on dismantling the Pentagon to ensure climate justice, there's an interesting intersection there we can unpack. Those are imperatives to the same degree as making sure that we, the people, aren't being fleeced by our criminal leaders. These are all imperatives. And I'm the reason I'm running as a Democrat is because I hope at the end of this process, not only to be representing San Francisco and Washington, D.C., but also that the Democratic Party might be able to live up to its name finally.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But even if so let's say this happens. Let's play it out. Bernie Sanders wins the nomination. He overcomes the cheating,
which we can expect, yeah.
Right? And the media smears and the thing, and he somehow becomes president. Well, the corporate Democrats. I mean, the Democrats are more conservative than they are progressive, right, in Congress, and so they'll just align with the right wing to oppose your agenda. So why not just start a new party anyway? I mean, it just.
Well, think about AOC and Ro Khanna and Pramila Jayapal and Bernie, right? They're all running as Democrats because we share an agenda of creating a different pole. And I totally think you're onto something here about recognizing that the Democrats are in the way of justice and they're not showing up for the values that they claim to stand for. I think the solution to that, we could either, and we tried this with the Green Party, to build an alternative party. I was a registered Green for more than a decade. And faced with the option of confronting the corporate resources of the Democratic Party, with a grassroots alternative versus just running within the party to take the reins, you might describe the strategy that we are pursuing as much more audacious and bold. I'm not trying to build a new carriage to beat the one on the field. I'm trying to wrestle the person with the reins out of the seat to take it over. And I think that there's a huge opportunity there because many Democrats, and I'm not talking about the electeds, I mean the rank and file, the base. I think many Democrats want to see bolder representation. They want to see more vision. There's a reason that Bernie is leading the Democratic field. It's because America has been waiting for voices to say that healthcare, housing, and food should be human rights. We shouldn't be forcing people to compete for basic necessities. It is brutal. It is barbaric. And in fact, maybe that's too mean to barbarians. I think barbarians were more civilized than we have been. They at least took care of their own communities. We kick each other into the street if we get sick. Think about how insane that is. And Americans are over it. They're over this paradigm that has been so vicious to human rights. It's been so vicious to working families that is kicking the future off a cliff. I think many Americans share our interests, yours and mine, in seeing a broad refashioning of our political landscape. And only by contending for the reins of the Democratic Party do we have a chance, I think, to meet the needs of the future on the time scale that we need it. If we're going to build an alternative party, that's going to take a generation. And according to the climate scientists, we don't have that kind of time. It's throw down or get out. And I kind of feel like with Nancy Pelosi, she's either going to show up for the interests of her constituency and our city, or our campaign is going to show her the door. So
how much does it hurt you? How much of a gut punch is it to see people like AOC and people in the squad go to Congress to fight the power and then end up having to vote for Nancy Pelosi as their goddamn leader anyway? By the way, after she moved to the right. She didn't move to the left to get AOC's vote. She moved to the right to get the conservatives, and the liberals just went along with. I mean, the progressives went along anyway because the progressive. They're not fighters, and you say you want to be an assertive. So, can you talk more about that? That your idea of being assertive?
Yeah, and just to press on the point at which Pelosi was chosen by the caucus to lead it, you might remember this would have been the beginning of, I guess, November 2018. 2019. No, sorry, 2018. I'm scrambling my years. So in November 2018, there was a debate. Barbara Lee at one point was going to run for the speaker.
Right.
And she ended up just barely losing the race for the Democratic Policy Caucus chair. And so this is like the number. It's almost the seat that Crowley got knocked out of in terms of the party leadership. By removing figures like Pelosi and people like me going into Congress, we can shift the balance of those votes, exactly those votes. I mean, the person who the set of people who I would most be eager to see serve as speaker would include Barbara Lee or Pramila Jayapal, perhaps someone from the squad in a future cycle. I'm eager to support those voices. And with the votes in Congress to make them the speaker, we don't have to have Pelosi's. And just to be to state something that I think is fairly obvious, the strongest way to make sure that Nancy Pelosi is no longer the Speaker of the House is just to make sure that her seat in Congress is occupied by someone else. And to that extent, I offer the national movement an opportunity to unseat a corporate co-opter of our party and a key player in the corporate co-optation of our country. An ally of Trump, as you've noted, somebody who mounts theatrical resistance, claims the support of people inclined towards resistance while paving his road. We can't let that go down anymore. And San Francisco's with me. I have 10 months to build the case and expand our support base beyond the 8,500 donors who are already fueling our campaign. Just this morning, I was endorsed by U.S. Senator Mike Gravel. I'm incredibly honored by his endorsement. He's somebody who I've admired for, honestly, my entire life. I mean, his legacy of reading the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record, the reason that Daniel Ellsberg is a national hero and not an international exile like Edward Snowden is because there is no Mike Gravel in Congress today. And the opportunity to revive that constitutional legacy, and this gets to your question about being assertive, I'll give you an example here. One of the ways that Mike Gravel was assertive, he challenged executive power by challenging executive secrecy. He stood with whistleblowers. And I want to take a minute here, if it's okay, just to unpack that. Whistleblowers are conscientious career government civil servants who give up their careers to do the right thing. They're people who, they're not radicals. They're not flaming lefties. They work for the government, right? And they end up falling on their swords to alert the public because they discover things that are so alarming to them. This is a perfect description of Edward Snowden. And instead of standing with those people and just understand what whistleblowers do for Congress, usually the way Congress finds out what's happening in the world, you invite executive officials to come before us in hearings, and they swear oaths and they say words, and sometimes those words aren't so connected to reality. And it takes whistleblowers to expose official lies. Edward Snowden came forward and exposed official lies by Obama-era officials as well as Bush-era officials, and Democrats buried their heads in the sand. I'm not okay with that. I've spent 10 years fighting the surveillance state, and it's not privacy I'm worried about. It's democracy. You can't have democracy when you can't have dissent, and you can't have dissent when you don't have privacy. It's not just the fact that surveillance makes people feel watched. It's the fact that surveillance makes people silent, especially vulnerable people. That kills our democracy. That's one of the reasons I think Senator Gravel sees in my voice an opportunity to revive and resuscitate the legacy that he once championed in Washington. And I think the American people, again, are with us both.
So you're against,
and I'm eager to represent that.
So you're against the surveillance state. You're against this unconstitutional spying that the government is doing on every American. And what a lot of people say, they go, well, if you don't have anything to hide, what are you afraid of? I go, well, I have a lot of shit to hide, but I also have a lot of shit to say. Right? Like
go.
I might have some shit to hide, but I've onto some stuff that the government's doing too. And that's how they can silence me, right?
Right. That's exactly right. And there's a big difference. One thing I appreciate about you is that you have an audience and a platform and you use it. And many people don't, or alternatively, many people don't have platforms, and they particularly are especially vulnerable to being silenced. Let's just take, for instance, let's say you're gay in Alabama, right? Or you're Muslim in South Texas, or you're, some brand of unfavored thing wherever you are. The fact of surveillance diminishes your ability to speak your voice. So the fact that you have something to say and you're willing to say it, that in my mind makes you American. It's so many people who need to speak up at a time like this to defend our neighbors. That to me is the call of the moment. And I'm somebody, I wield a lot of privilege. I had a chance to train and teach when I was still a student at Stanford Law School. I've worked for the world's most prolific digital civil liberties organization, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. For 6 years, I ran a national nonprofit dedicated to flipping the Patriot Act. And I did that under the Obama administration when liberals, many self-described liberals, couldn't be, they couldn't care less about their own supposedly stated values. And I'm eager across these different roles that I've had, whether it was working at EFF, whether it was leading the Bill of Rights Defense Committee, whether it was representing Jason West and bringing the first marriage equality case in the state of New York when other Democrats were nowhere to be found, or organizing anti-war demonstrations 15 years ago and now again today. In all of these different contexts, we have opportunities. I think you're totally right to see how bad the crises are and how they compound on each other. But I often feel moved to remind people, as bad as our crises are, our opportunities are just as immense. If we're able to get on the other side of the climate crisis, if we ensure a just transition for all workers to be part of the new economy that is based on renewable energy and a green economy, that's going to be an incredible opportunity for a renaissance in our civilization. Like, what's it going to be like when people don't have to make choices about where they live based on their jobs, where they don't have to make choices about how much time they spend with their families because they're pressed to put food on the table, when we can actually care for each other in communities and we have a social policy that reflects that joint commitment to each other in the future? I think that we have a bright future, as dark as the clouds that are looming not just on our horizon but over us at the moment are. I think there are huge opportunities for us in the United States of America going forward if we manage to reclaim our democracy from the corporate the defenders of corporate rule who have taken it from us.
So do you think that the establishment sees you as a real threat or just as an amusement?
The reason I think they do see me as a real threat, one, is that Nancy Pelosi showed up for a theatrical impeachment process after a year of sitting on her hands. The things that forced her hands included people around the country saying, get this criminal president out of office, a whistleblower from the intelligence community. And mind you, there's an interesting irony here that at the same time that the speaker is relying on a whistleblower for her impeachment process, she also is kicking other whistleblowers down the stairs, silencing them. This is a point I've made a few times, and I wish more reporters covered this. Speaker Pelosi unilaterally imposes a set of House rules that deny every member of Congress, except for her hand-picked deputies, staff with security clearance. That's why executive secrecy is able to persist. We would know so much more. Journalists would know so much more. We, the people, would know so much more if Speaker Pelosi weren't the speaker actively enforcing executive secrecy on a Democratic Congress.
Wow. Have they smeared you yet?
It comes out in different ways. Usually I hear people talking about my appearance, and I don't know how many of them were sent by the Pelosi's or if it's just a generational sensibility that, I'm going to have to fight around. But the other way that I know she's taken heed of us, I'll give you two more. One is the War Powers resolution that Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders sponsored last spring. I was speaking at a protest at Speaker Pelosi's office at the precise time that they announced that they were flipping positions to embrace the Khanna-Sanders War Powers resolution. And granted, just like impeachment, she only showed up halfway because then she refused to hold Trump's feet to the fire and actually defend that position in the conference committee. And then I'll give you another one. This is especially fun. So we've been projecting nighttime projection actions around the city. And we've projected our campaign logo, any number of memes on the side of the federal building in San Francisco. Speaker Pelosi spent public dollars to install floodlights to block us from projecting messages. So she's spending money to insulate herself from criticism by our campaign. So I have a very clear indication that she knows we're there.
So that's good. That's good. That is a sign that that's good. You have to have signs that they're afraid of you. So I just want to go. I don't want to be a prick about it, but that guy in the White House is not a whistleblower. That CIA guy is just a spook doing shit that spooks do. If he was a whistleblower, he'd be blowing the whistle on the CIA and jeopardizing his job. That's not what he did. So he's not a whistleblower.
If he was a whistleblower, he'd be in prison.
That's right, because that's what we do to whistleblowers. I get
your point.
Yeah. Okay.
I hear that.
Okay, so and so, you first of all, I want to show you this. So I have a soft spot for you for many reasons. One is that you actually were arrested for doing journalism. And so I'll show a little bit of that when James Clapper, former head of our national security state, was lying to Congress about surveillance. You want to see this? Watch this.
What I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It
does not.
God. It
Not
enrages
wittingly.
me every time I see that clip. It's like, how can he get away with that?
So he's just blatantly lying, right? And so that's what another thing, right? So we have this guy on, and now they come on to MSNBC and CNN, and they're spoken like they're real patriots, when in fact they're criminals who lied to Congress, which means they lied to the American people. And then so you confronted him after he said that. Here, I just want to show that too.
What do you have to say to communities of color that are so hyper-policed that we're subjected to extrajudicial assassination for selling loose cigarettes when you can get away with perjury before the Senate? Why is your agency above the law?
So that was a very cool thing that you did there. That was great.
Thanks, brother.
That you
I should be clear, it wasn't the same moment. The hearing where he lied to Senator Wyden was about 18 months before I had the chance to question him.
And so that was you making the point that why do you guys get to break the law on television? And then, but everybody else, but like you make the point there, and what you were saying is Eric Garner sells Lucy's, which is a threat to no one, gets choked out before he even gets a trial.
Right. On video. I mean, and think about this with respect to the debate about police body cameras. A lot of people in the movement for Black Lives even were saying, we want police body cameras. Eric Garner is the proof that police can murder someone on tape, viewed by millions of people around the world, and there's still no accountability. The only person involved in that incident who went to jail was the person who caught the video. Mm-hmm. And like that's not okay. It's not okay either for public officials to lie to Congress about matters of grave constitutional importance. It's also not okay for our supposed public servants to prey on and arbitrarily kill random people who are suspected of trivial acts. But it's even worse when we allow both of those things to happen. We have permissive justice for the powerful, and we have predatory, lethal justice for the powerless. And I care too much about the principle of equal justice. I care too much about due process. I care too much about our Constitution. I care too much about the values that we have stated on paper to just live my life while we're shredding those values as if there isn't a 5-alarm fire going on. And I think that one of the things about this political moment that I'm so inspired by, for most of my life, I've felt alone in reacting to the 5-alarm fire that I've seen all around me. But now with Trump in office, with especially the possibility of a war in Iran, I don't think there's an American around who doesn't feel a sense of alarm and crisis. Everybody understands finally that it is time to show up. We can't just, lead our lives and put food on the table and pretend like our office holders have a handle on it. The one silver lining of the moment is that the collapse of the system is so glaringly obvious that I think everyone is now reaching in to recover our democracy. And in that act, profound possibility emerges.
So the one silver lining, or one of the silver linings from the Trump presidency, is now that the right is skeptical of the intelligence community, which is unbelievable that it's happened in my lifetime, but it took Trump to do it. Now the right is skeptical of the FBI and the CIA and of our foreign wars. So would you...
It's bizarre, right?
It is, right? Which is, I mean, people should make more of that. I think it's... But do you think that, would you be reaching out to the right to help oppose our intelligence community and these foreign wars?
Yes, and I've done that before. So I helped organize the Fourth Amendment Caucus. It's a bipartisan group of House members that have come together across party lines in the past to challenge the surveillance state. I'm proud of that work. I did that in Washington as an organizer when I was leading the Bill of Rights Defense Committee. My work at EFF similarly worked with people from across the political spectrum. I was working with Occupy Oakland and the Oakland Privacy Working Group, which was fighting surveillance policies at the local level in and around the Bay Area, at the same time that I was working with Omaha Liberty Ladies in Nebraska to fight the use of cell site simulators. These are government surveillance tools that spy on cell phone networks, and we were fighting those in Nebraska. I have long worked on both sides of the aisle in defense of constitutional rights. At the same time that as a flaming leftist, I have challenged corporate rule across all of its different manifestations. Another way to put that is that and I'll even lay out the spectrum of issues: money in politics, legalizing cannabis across the federal system, dismantling mass incarceration, and dismantling mass surveillance. Those are all issues that there are transpartisan consensus already favoring. And if we work across the aisle, I think that there's a chance to refashion the dynamic. We're told, and I think this feeds into part of the concern that I understand you have about the corporate co-optation of the Democratic Party. We're told that it's left versus right. And you and I recognize that it's often left and right against we the people. The way that AOC has said this, that it's often top versus bottom. I sometimes describe it as center versus periphery. And the periphery shares interests in preventing the ossification of power and money in politics and the way that it seized our system. That's an issue that many libertarians are concerned about. The way, particularly, that weapons manufacturers and their economic interests drive international conflict. Many libertarians share a concern about that. They're not going to see eye to eye with me on my climate agenda, right? They're not going to see eye to eye with me on wanting to establish healthcare for all or expand human rights to include housing and food, but they will at least embrace the anti-authoritarian parts of my agenda. And I think that there's a big opportunity there to outflank the corporate consensus among the Democratic and Republican parties by getting it on both sides with populists. And I think we have a real chance to do that with the right voices in Congress.
I guess one thing I'll ask you, Shahid, based on all your work at the EFF is, and I know we've talked about this before, but I'd like you to say it for this audience. As far as digital rights goes, what are some things that are definitely on your agenda? If we can talk about municipal broadband, net neutrality, stuff like that.
Thank you for the question, Ron, and it's great to hear your voice. Net neutrality is a human right. If we don't have the same access to the global internet infrastructure, we're all basically going to be taken for a ride, and the promise of the internet can't possibly emerge in a non-net neutral world. This is one of the few areas where I'll actually give Nancy Pelosi credit for showing up. Net neutrality is one of the areas, one of the issues that she has stood for, and I do want to give credit where it's due. Other areas of digital rights, I'm very concerned about antitrust enforcement and the failures of antitrust enforcement over the last generation. This is going to go in a couple of different places. One, under the existing antitrust statutory regime, there's a lot of pressure that members of Congress can put on the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission to show up for work. Show up for work by scrutinizing mergers where big companies acquire their would-be competitors, like Facebook acquiring Instagram or WhatsApp, and also scrutinizing anti-competitive acts by companies with market power. So like when Facebook with market power starts unilaterally eroding the privacy protections that it allows its users, those should be cognizable harms for antitrust enforcement. I've written articles to that effect for EFF. Beyond that, though, I want to expand the antitrust statutes to include political markets. So follow me here. The Supreme Court recently said that there's no justiciable way to intervene in cases of partisan gerrymandering, where state legislators basically team up and decide how to divide the territory within their states across their voters. That's exactly what companies are prohibited flatly from doing in commercial markets, but we let political parties and politicians do it all the time. There's no reason that politicians should get away with doing to voters what companies are prohibited from doing to consumers. It undermines the process and it undermines democracy. We can fix that through antitrust law. I also want to statutorily rescind antitrust exemptions that protect sports leagues that abuse their players' and workers' rights. So the NFL benefits from a public subsidy. Right. That's an exemption from antitrust. Mm-hmm. If they're going to silence Colin Kaepernick, we, the people, should not be subsidizing that industry.
Right on.
And I want to fix that, and we can do that through antitrust law. There's other dimensions of digital rights, like the right to encryption, the right to repair. I'd like to see our rights advance in all of these different dimensions, to see people have more agency over our lives and futures as opposed to less. I think that is, if I were to try to distill my philosophy into its most essential elements, that's it. It's about liberating people so that people can have more choices and can lead more fulfilled lives. And I think the key to that is to make sure that we're not being preyed upon either by intelligence agencies or by corporations or by tech platforms or by our supposed representatives, for that matter.
Okay, I have two questions for you. It's Steph Summerano here. First question is, when you're elected Speaker of the House, will you return to this show?
We might be getting a little ahead of ourselves. I'll try to get into Congress before I worry about who's going to be the speaker. And just for the record, I'm going to be much more eager to support Ilhan or AOC for speaker before I ever seek that kind of role. Please. I appreciate the question.
All right. And the next one is finally, I'm curious, I'm a native Californian and I've seen a lot of despair in my community because of the homeless situation. I looked quickly at your website and I'm curious, maybe you can share a little bit what you want to do with housing and to help our homeless population.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steph, for the question. There's a couple different ways that we can and must take action to try to deal with what I describe as just the moral failing of our civilization that stares us in the face every day that we walk out of our houses and are stepping over people sleeping without shelter. There's plenty of shelter for everyone. Many houses are empty, and the idea that we don't have vacancy taxes to force landlords to open, it's right that. And I'm going to get, we're going to get like aggressive with this. I see a huge intersection here with healthcare. The leading cause of homelessness is medical bankruptcy. The people that we see sleeping in the street, they're not people who made bad choices. They're not people who, were addicts and then they lost their place. These are people who got sick, and we kick sick people into the street. I'm not okay with that. Universal health care, Medicare for all, will do more than any single policy to prevent homelessness. And I think that plus vacancy taxes are two of the longest levers we can pull to ensure that everybody is housed. And there's no reason that everybody shouldn't be housed in a civilization as wealthy as ours.
That's great. Thank you.
That's great. Yes. By the way, our secret word was cognizable, and you hit it today.
Oh, he hit it. Good for him.
Nice.
That was the word of the day.
Cognizable.
What did he win?
Well, he wins hand sanitizer, so after he has to shake hands with those greedy politicians, he can clean himself off.
I might need that. Thanks, Jimmy.
So, Shahid, we really wish you good luck in your race against Nancy Pelosi. And, so in March, now people need to keep in mind, March is the primary. That's an important date. If you get in the top two, then I think you'll have a real shot to knock her off. So everybody, what's your website?
Shahidforchange.us.
All right, there you go. Shahidforchange.us. All right, thanks for being our guest, and thanks for not beating me up for saying that stuff about you.
Thank you so much for having me on, brother. It really is nice to connect with you. I appreciate the chance for intelligent people of goodwill to find constructive disagreement, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Okay, right back at you. You're welcome back anytime. Hey, everybody, come see a live Jimmy Dore show. We're going to be in Portland on January 11th and 12th, then Tempe, Sacramento, San Jose, Miami, and a lot more. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets for all our live shows. And please go to jimmydorecomedy.com/join. Become a premium member. We give you tons of extra material every week. Thanks for your support.